I am happy to be here with you tonight. Thank you for being so welcoming. And I'd like to point out to you, let me see if I can find her, Tammy, who's in the back of the room, and Tracy, who registered you this evening. It's really them who make sure that these Aspire Movement events take place. So we've been doing this up in the Wisconsin Rapids area for a number of years, and thought now that we have an Aspire's Clinic and Jill Bone as our provider at the Aspire's Clinic, that we wanted to come down to Adams Friendship area and bring our presentations down here. So I hope you enjoyed visiting with some of our people who were at the tables and that you tried our selection of appetizers. You'll notice in your folders that we've included the recipes for those appetizers tonight, so take those recipe cards home and try them yourself. You'll also notice that we have a lot of information in your folder to share with you, as well as a printout of Dr. Martin's presentation for later on. So before I go any further, I would ask that we all remember to silence our phones. No, we don't charge $5 if your phone goes off. Just out of courtesy to the veterans, it would be nice. Our first guest this evening is Jenny Henson with the Adams Friendship Snack Packs. I don't know that you've ever heard of that, but she is the recipient of all your generous donations of the granola bars, and she'll share a little information about this vital program.
I would just like to thank Aspirus for inviting me to this wonderful event because the donations were wonderful.
Jenny, could you please move over so the light isn't right
Oh,
behind
I'm
you?
sorry.
Thank you.
Sure. So I started this program about 4 years ago after we had a late start on a Monday. Our students were upset. They were hungry up to the weekend. I'm sorry. And we didn't serve breakfast because we didn't think we needed to. I know my daughter was thrilled she didn't have to go to school early and we ate breakfast at home. But we had several students that were upset. And we learned from that, and I know Vicki, our food service director, made adjustments and now has food for those kids, even on late starts. So we fixed that, but we knew the weekends weren't good for some of the kids. So I modeled my program after Wisconsin Dells. They send snacks home with their students on the weekend. And I learned through them how to do it and started raising money, and wonderful family that I have helps me, and we do it every weekend for the kids. So right now we service 352 kids a week. We have over 70% poverty rate in our district. So there is I think a big need for that. But right now we're sending about 4 snacks home a weekend. If it's a longer weekend like this weekend, there's 3 days off for the kids. I send 6 home. My husband's actually out doing it at the middle school and the high school right now. But I have a lot of awesome friends, family, community members that not only support my fundraisers, but help me pack and distribute. I have a golf event coming up on May 17th. It's one of my biggest fundraisers of the year, so if anybody's interested in golfing, we'll be doing that. I just do smaller fundraisers throughout the year, and I also have people that'll donate and sponsor a child. It's $45 a year, and that gets me through the school year for each student. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the program.
Do you go all the way through high school?
I do. I start at 4K. I do go to the Head Start program also, and I go through high school. So the school does what they can. They have lots of grants.
Should work. Yeah, I hear it.
The food service director at the school does everything she can. She has supper at night for kids. They have a fruit and vegetable program that they give snacks to let the kids try fruits and vegetables. But she does everything she can. But on the weekends, we can't get to the students. So during the school year right now, what my program can afford is snacks to send home with the students. And then hopefully we'll go on from there. I do have volunteers now that we've gotten better. I know the Lions are coming in a couple weeks for me and they're packing snack packs for me. And they can do in about an hour and a half what my family takes, several hours throughout the month. So that's really, it's been awesome to see the support from the community, and I appreciate everybody that was able to come tonight and donate. That was wonderful. That'll save me some money in donations. Yeah.
Is this for free and reduced lunch students, or is it for anybody who wants snacks? at the
It's for free right now. All I can afford is up to free. So, if anybody has any questions, my biggest thing right now that I'm trying to work on is a 503C, so I can do things tax-free. So if anybody knows anybody, they can point me in the right direction. I finally have enough money banked because it costs money to file that. So if anybody knows anything about that, I would appreciate it, but otherwise, I just appreciate you all bringing your snacks tonight and being here. Yeah.
Do you just give granola snacks or are there
No.
other snacks?
I have 4 that go in a bag. I try and give them a variety. So there's sometimes applesauce, craisins, granola bars, peanut butter crackers. I try and
Well, I'm
rotate.
just thinking, would you rather us give you money to buy stuff or just sometimes bring in a bunch of snacks? Or?
I do shop around and try and spend about a quarter per snack per student per. So it's about $1 to $1.50 a bag, depending on how many weekend days there are. So it's I'm happy with either.
Okay.
But I do, and then I have an account with Cisco, and they're helping me try and save money also. So they've been really helpful. Yeah.
Do you have an office? Do you have a place where we can contact you?
I have brochures out there with my cell phone number on it. I work at the school, but the school doesn't fund it. But I do work at the administration building at the school, and they're very supportive of me getting visitors. So if you want, I am there. But I also have a brochure out there with my cell phone number on it. Thank you.
Have you contacted any business organizations for donations? Like, you talked about cranberries and so forth. Have you talked to any, like, Ocean Spray about donating snacks on a regular basis to the program?
I've tried a little bit, what I'm hearing like from the Dells and different places that have done it, tried it before, they're so big that they don't necessarily are able to keep donating all the time, just littler organizations, I guess. But businesses in town have been wonderful and awesome, donating food when I do food fundraisers, like when I'm selling brat fries or stuff like that. Skillet will give me the food for that, Country Skillet, but IJ gives me discounts when I'm trying to do stuff like that. I mean, so they're all, the community-wise, it's been awesome. We're doing a golf outing, we do a Chinese raffle with that, and then we're doing a raffle, selling raffle tickets, sorry. And like, the bank is donating a grill, and the other bank, Adams Community Bank, and then Royal Bank's donating a bigger prize. So that's, really pretty awesome, I think, for our small community. Thanks. Thank you very much.
That is a very special program, and thank you everyone for donating to it tonight. I just can't imagine children going home hungry or coming to school hungry. It's hard for them to learn, so thanks so much for your generous donations. I'd now like to introduce Jill Bone-Wolf. She is the nurse practitioner at our Aspirus Clinic in Rapids. She's going to come up and tell a little bit about herself, and then she's going to tell you why the recipes in your folder and those appetizers you tried tonight are good for you.
I'm Jill Bone-Wolf. I'm the board-certified family nurse practitioner at the Aspirus Adams Clinic, just a few blocks away. I'm also internationally board-certified in lactation. That's a special passion of mine for many, many years. I am also a mother of 5. My baby is 6'4". You might hear me joke about that. So I have 3 daughters and 2 stepchildren. So I have 5 teenagers, 2 are legally adults now, but and 3 golden retrievers, and I just moved, so it's been busy. But I hope you're all enjoying your appetizers. I have some information to share with you about the nutrition component. And those of you that know me know I'm quite passionate about nutrition. and I probably drive my patients crazy, but it's important. So, of course, Aspires, they focus their appetizers based on the theme of the presentation in the evening. So, of course, we wanted your snacks to be heart healthy. When talking about nutrition and heart health, you want to choose foods that are low in cholesterol, low in saturated fat, no trans fats, no added sugar, and low in sodium. However, you also want foods that are high in fiber and flavor. So it's kind of a tough combination, isn't it? Knowing that we typically want to avoid sodium or consider reduced salt items and low in saturated fat, you might be wondering why the pizza stuffed mushrooms ended up on the menu tonight. Traditionally, pizza sauce, cheese and pepperoni, or any processed meats are high in sodium. And cheese is also high in saturated fat. What I wanted to offer was an example of the importance of portion size. I don't expect anyone in this room to never eat pizza again, so by monitoring your portion size, you can still enjoy some of your favorite flavors while you follow the heart healthy recommendations. For the mushrooms, I would recommend 2 to 3 mushrooms as a serving to stay within the recommendations for sodium and saturated fat. The garlic white bean dip is a very high fiber food with no cholesterol, no added sugar, and minimal saturated fat. Draining and rinsing the low sodium beans removes even more salt. Pair this with raw veggies like carrot or celery sticks, and you have a super nutritious, perfect, heart-healthy menu item. Lastly, the peanut butter banana sushi is a great dessert swap. Most cookies, cakes, pies are loaded with saturated fat, cholesterol, and added sugar. Store-bought varieties tend to also be high in trans fat. The original recipe calls for peanut butter, but we substituted sun butter tonight, just in case anyone here has a nut allergy. The peanut butter banana sushi is a sweet treat that has a good amount of fiber and no added sugar. Plus, you get added nutrition from having fruit for dessert. As Nan mentioned, the recipes are in your folders, so hopefully you can make tonight's appetizers for your friends and family. Does anybody have any questions about the Aspires Adams Clinic? We've been open for about a year, so I think we're going on 14 months. We do have lab available. As far as on-site lab, we have limited lab processing, so we can do some of the basic labs, but before patients come in for routine appointments with fasting labs, they typically complete the fasting labs 1 to 2 days prior, because those labs get sent out to Wisconsin Rapids or Wausau, and we have the results back to review at their appointment. We do have imaging on site, limited imaging as far as x-ray. We don't have a mammography unit quite yet, so we do send our patients to Wisconsin Rapids, and we've been quite successful with coordinating colonoscopies and all the good screening measures through the Wisconsin Rapids office as well. So I see a variety of ages. I have infants, and the oldest patient I've ever cared for is 102. So I have had plenty of 98 and 99-year-old patients come to established care. So it's unfortunate the area has had a lack of medical service options for several years, so it's really great that Aspires is in the area and able to expand some of the options. No questions? All right, have a good night.
Thank you very much, Jill. I appreciate it. So now, without further ado, we're going to move on to our keynote speaker. I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Robert Martin, and he has a presentation called Listen to Your Heart. And he will cover, of course, heart disease. So Dr. Martin, as I said, is a cardiologist. He is located up in Wisconsin Rapids. In fact, he lives just down the street from the hospital in this beautiful old house with his lovely wife, Cindy Lou, and their dog, Willow. I always have to get the dog in there, I don't know why. He attended medical school in Tucson, Arizona, completed his internal medicine internship and residency with the Navy in California, and then went on to complete his fellowship in cardiology in San Diego, also with the Navy. So not only does he serve us but at one time he served our nation. So Dr. Martin retired as a captain in the Navy after serving for 25 years. He and his wife of 30 years, Cindy Lou, have 3 adult children, Ty, Heather, and Whitney, and I can tell you they're very active in the, Cindy Lou and Dr. Martin are very active in the community. Since moving to Wisconsin Rapids about 3 years ago, Dr. Martin and Cindy Lou have become so involved. She is a member of the hospital auxiliary, an all-around tireless volunteer. And among other things, Dr. Martin has been a celebrity chef for the Wisconsin Rapids Family Center fundraiser called Men in the Kitchen. So we have, I don't know if you've heard about it before, but we have men come and cook a dinner and serve it to a table of 8, I believe. And the Family Center sells tickets, and then it raises money for to run the shelter. So I'd like to now introduce you to Dr. Martin.
Thanks. I don't know if I'm gonna make this work. I need 3 hands. So thanks. I'm gonna be talking about, I gotta figure out how else to get out of the way of the screen here. I'm gonna talk a little bit about heart failure. That's my topic. What I do want to, the first presenter, she left already?
Dr. Bell?
No.
Jenny.
Oh, there you are. You're in the middle. All right. So I tell you, I did this presentation in Rapids a couple weeks ago, and they had a kind of a similar kind of a presentation from somebody up there that's doing things. But what I will tell you is that I'm going to be talking about heart disease, and heart disease is prominent now in the Western world because we live long enough to get heart disease. All right. Back in the day, people would die young, and so there wasn't as much heart disease because you didn't get that far, all right? You died of trauma, you died of infections, you died of different things, and you died of nutrition problems. So I'm gonna challenge myself, I'm gonna challenge everybody in here. This is something that needs to be supported because these kids aren't gonna get to the point where they're gonna get heart disease if we don't take care of them, all right? So I'm just gonna throw that out there. That's my little political statement for today. All right, so let's see. So listen to your heart. That's me. Goody goody. That's me too. That's basically what Nan just was talking about. All right, so I'm going to really be talking about heart failure. I'm going to try to stay at everybody's way because there's people over here who want to see all this stuff too, I guess. Although again, all these slides are in your little thing, so you can follow along, although they're kind of small, so if you need glasses like me, you may or may not be able to see them very well. But you can follow along on the stuff that you got in there if you want to. So what is heart failure? So that's the first thing I want to mention is heart failure develops when the main pumping chambers of the heart, the ventricles, can't pump enough blood to your body. All right, that's their job is to pump blood around. And if they can't get it there for some reason, then that's what we call heart failure. Well, now the result of this is your body doesn't get enough oxygen, and the blood and fluid then backs up because if it can't go forward, it's got to go somewhere, and it goes backwards and it backs up. And most commonly, it backs up into the lungs, causing shortness of breath. It can back up into the abdomen, causing bloating in the abdomen and legs, resulting in swelling. And so when we see people with heart failure, these are the things we commonly see. People are short of breath, they have bloating in their abdomen, and they have swelling in their legs. Now, what isn't heart failure? Well, heart failure isn't a heart attack, all right? Now, heart attack can cause heart failure, but they're not the same thing, okay? So, because other things can cause heart failure too, it doesn't have to be a heart attack. Heart attack is something different, and I've talked about this before, and I won't go into detail unless somebody has specific questions, but the bottom line is they're different, okay? Secondly, heart failure isn't a cardiac arrest, so basically, when your heart fails, you don't just drop dead. All right? At least the way I'm talking about heart failure. Now, heart failure can increase the risk of death, okay? But again, they're not the same thing. Heart failure is in palpitations slash arrhythmia. So basically, palpitations are when we're sitting here right now and our heart beats, we don't really notice it because it just kind of beats and we don't pay any attention to it. If for some reason you notice your heart beating, that's the term we give that is palpitations. If it's going fast, irregular, whatever, pounding hard, that's palpitations, all right? But that's not heart failure either, all right? Now again, rhythm abnormalities can cause heart failure, and people that have heart failure can get rhythm abnormalities, but they're different things, okay? So, before I start out talking about systolic and diastolic heart failure, I want to mention there's another way to divide this up between what we call right heart failure and left heart failure. So the right heart, well, let's start with the left heart. The left heart is the main pumping chamber, and that's what I'm mainly going to be talking about, okay? So at the main pumping chamber of the heart, it takes the oxygenated red blood and sends it to the body to be used by the body for whatever it is, to the liver to do liver things, and to the muscles to do muscle things, and everything to do what it's supposed to do. Then once it's used, it becomes the blue blood, comes back around to the right side of the heart, which then pumps it, and there's a right ventricle, which then pumps it to the lungs, so it can get more oxygen again. Then it becomes red blood, and then it goes back to the left side, so the left side can then send it to the body again. So it's a big circuit, okay, going around. Right heart failure, when we talk about the swelling in the belly and the swelling in the legs, that's right heart failure primarily. Because everything's backing up from that right heart failure through the veins and going that way, okay? The causes of right heart failure, number one cause is left heart failure. So when the left heart fails, everything backs up into the lungs and backs up through the lungs into the right heart and then backs up in the right heart back into the legs and the belly, okay? So it's just kind of this progression that kind of keeps backing up. But other things can also cause right heart failure. People can have lung disease, because again, it's the part that sends it to the lungs. So if people have significant lung disease, that can cause right heart failure. And it may have nothing to do with the left heart. Left heart may be completely normal. It's all right heart failure that can happen. So people that have COPD or emphysema, people who have sleep apnea, okay, which I'll talk a little bit more about a little later, they can have right heart failure. So again, right heart failure is the swelling and things that you see in the belly and the legs. Now, when we talk about left heart failure, which again is the main pumping chamber, there's two kinds, and that's what I put up here. There's what's called systolic and diastolic. All right, systolic is when the heart squeezes. We call that systole, and that's called systolic. So if the heart doesn't squeeze well, it's weak, it doesn't squeeze well, we call that systolic heart failure. So if the heart can't squeeze well, it doesn't send good oxygenated blood efficiently out to the system, to things to be used. So people often feel symptoms related to that. And if you can't get it out, then you can't get new blood in, so everything backs up. And when it backs up, it goes into the lungs, it goes into the abdomen and the legs and all the things that causes right heart failure that we were talking about. So that's systolic heart failure or systolic dysfunction. Then there's diastolic. Diastolic is when the heart relaxes. So it squeezes, then it relaxes. So some people have a problem with relaxing. So their squeeze is fine, but when it tries to relax, it's stiff and it can't relax well, okay? So when that happens, again, things back up because if it doesn't relax so it can fill, then blood can't get in it, so everything backs up again. So even though it's two different problems, one is it doesn't squeeze well, one is it doesn't relax well, the end is the same. Everything backs up, okay? So that's why people get similar symptoms with both either systolic or diastolic heart failure. And again, ultimately, either one of those can cause the right heart failure, which then causes all the other stuff with the swelling in the legs, things like that we'll talk about in a minute. So symptoms of heart failure, that's what we're getting to now. Now, there's a whole bunch of them here. You don't have to have all of them, you can have heart failure. You can have some of them, and it doesn't mean you have heart failure, all right? Because many of these things are caused by other things too. So you can't say, well, just because I get swollen or tender abdomen and loss of appetite that I have heart failure. That doesn't mean that. You might have heart failure, but there's other things that cause that. So we have to look and see, is there something else causing that? All right? So you get shortness of breath, swelling of the legs, chronic lack of energy, difficulty sleeping, swollen tender abdomen, cough, increased urination at night, and confusion. All right, let's talk about shortness of breath and cough. So And now I've gotta get back on, I usually have a podium, so now I gotta get back on here to make sure I get on track and don't forget things that I need to talk about. All right, so the thing I wanna talk about this is number one, one of the signs or symptoms, as we call it, of heart failure is people can get short of breath. And again, it's progressive. Initially you get it with activity, and it may be a fair amount of activity, you get short of breath, and then gradually it's less and less activity, and eventually people can, with severe heart failure, can have short of breath when they're really not doing anything, okay? Now again, there's other things that cause you to be short of breath. Lung disease can cause you to be short of breath. So people have COPD, emphysema, asthma, things like that, you can be short of breath from that. So that doesn't just get you short of breath, doesn't mean you have heart failure, but it's one of the signs. And so it may be a piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't absolutely mean it. You just have to look at, is there other things, and some of the other things we'll be talking about, to see whether other things are going along with that. Swelling and weight gain, all right? One of the things, well, let me just start out with swelling real quick. So the way you check yourself for swelling is what we call lower extremity edema. If you think about it, gravity is trying to pull everything down to your feet, okay? So when you get swelling somewhere from back up, it's going to, gravity's going to pull all that down there. So people will get swelling usually in their legs. That's the most prominent place. The way you tell is if you find you need to find a hard spot on your leg, either the ankle bone or the shin bone, and you push on it. And you hold it for about 5 seconds, and then you let go, and you look and see, can you feel a divot or an indent? And if you can, that's swelling. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Again, there's other things that cause swelling. It's not all that. And people can have problems with their veins, and it may just be a vein problem, okay, and it has nothing to do with their heart. So there's other things that can cause swelling. So just because somebody has swelling doesn't mean they have heart failure, but again, if you have heart failure and other things that were on this list, then the more you have, the more suspicious you are, okay? Weight is a big thing that we keep track of in cardiology and in the heart clinic because it's a way to get a warning, early warning in a lot of ways, that somebody's holding on to too much water, all right? So the way to think about it is you can eat too much, and again, a lot of these little analogies I'm telling you about how these things work, I tell my patients these all the time in clinic. So I'm just basically taking my clinic and bringing it out here to y'all. You can eat too much and gain 3 pounds in a week. You have to really work at it to eat too much and gain 3 pounds in a day, okay? It's not easy to do. Maybe on Thanksgiving when everybody really gorgeous, you might do that. But it's really hard to gain 3 pounds in a day. So big jumps in weight in short periods of time usually is water. You're holding on to water, all right? So that's why we tell people you should weigh yourself every day when you have heart failure. So we know, are you holding on to extra water? Because if so, we need to try to get rid of that water. Otherwise, it'll start snowballing on you and accumulating, and then you end up in the ER or the hospital, okay? And so that's things that people generally don't want to spend their time doing. So, weight is important to keep track of, and again, I tell patients all the time, I use this exact same statement this morning to somebody. It's important to use the same scale, which is your scale. I don't care how accurate it is. You shouldn't say, well, my scale says I weigh, 182, and then the clinic scale says I weigh 187. That doesn't mean you gain 5 pounds. It means scales are different, number one. Number two, it also depends on what you're wearing when you're standing on your scale, all right? So there's differences. So you should, when I tell people to weigh themselves, you have to weigh yourself every day, wearing roughly the same thing at roughly the same time to make sure you're comparing apples to apples to apples to apples. And then we'll know if there's been a jump up or not, okay? So again, what I was getting around to saying is, I tell my patient this morning, I don't care if your scale starts out saying you weigh 8 pounds or you weigh 800 pounds. To me, that number doesn't matter. What matters is if you go from 8 to 11, that's a problem. If you go from 800 to 803, that's a problem, all right? So that's how I look at it. Now again, in reality, if you weigh 800 pounds, that is a problem. All right, low energy. So again, there's lots of other things that cause low energy. People can have anemia, they can have low thyroid, they can have other things that can make them have low energy, but that's also one of the things that goes along with heart failure. Because if you think about it, if that red blood isn't getting sent out to your muscles and your brain and your liver and everything like that like it's supposed to, it'll make you tired because your tissues aren't getting enough, oxygen. So it'll make you feel tired, all right? So that's one of the other things that people will complain of. Difficulty breathing due to breathing, or difficulty sleeping, due to breathing problems. So this man here is sitting in a position that we call orthopnea. Orthopnea means I can't lay down without getting short of breath. That's another sign of heart failure. Now, it's also something we see in people with COPD and emphysema. So again, you can't say just this thing is heart failure, but when you have this and some of the other things we're talking about, the more of them you have, the more suspicious you are. That might be what's going on. And if there's any question, you go see somebody like Jill or me and try to figure it out. Abdominal bloating, all right? I'm not talking about being fat, all right? Plenty of us are fat, but this is different. This is fluid, all right? This is a fluid buildup. And so it's, if you just can feel a distension or like you can feel like fluids in there because that's what's in there, all right? That's another thing you can see. But you can also see this in liver failure and kidney failure, all right? So again, I don't want to underemphasize these, but I don't want to overemphasize either because these things happen with other things. So we can't just, I don't want everybody running out the room and like going and looking at their belly in the mirror trying to decide whether they've got heart failure or not, okay? It's more complicated than that. All right, frequent urination, especially at night. Anybody know where this is? It's a famous statue, or it's a fountain technically. Anybody? It's in Brussels, Belgium. Okay. maybe you see it. Maybe you see that out there all the time. I don't know. And it's actually literally in French. The name of the fountain is Piss Boy. Now, again, so people that tend to have heart failure tend to go to the bathroom a lot because, again, things are backing up and you're trying to get rid of fluid. Now, what I will tell you though is, again, there's other reasons people have to go to the bathroom a lot. Number one, any woman here who's been pregnant multiple times or had kids, that's one of the things that commonly happens. So if you've been having it all along, it doesn't mean it's heart failure just because now you're having to go to the bathroom at night all the time. With men, it's prostate. And again, as you get older, you run into those problems. So it's generally, if it happens all of a sudden, like you didn't have it, now you have it, all right? Or it seems to be getting a lot worse. That could be another sign that you're having a heart failure issues. Confusion. I often find myself looking like this. But again, confusion, there's other things obviously that cause confusion. As we all know, I mean, people can have different kinds of problems with, low sodium can cause it, high calcium can cause it. Certainly people can have dementia itself, and that's obviously people are often confused. But if in the constellation of the other things, if you have problems remembering things, like not just the usual, I mean, I have problems remembering things a lot of times, but I'm lucky I'm here tonight. But the bottom line is that this, in conjunction with other things, makes you concerned that maybe you have heart failure. All right, what are some of the causes and contributions to heart failure? Now I'm going to start with one that's not on this list. And the reason I'm going to start with that one is because at the presentation in Rapids, somebody brought up the question about this topic, and I said, you know what, I should have put that on here, and I didn't put it on here. So I'm going to give, I don't even remember who it was, but I'm going to give him credit because there was somebody else whose idea was to talk about this. So one of the things that can contribute, and I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, is rhythm abnormalities. One common one that people may have heard of is called atrial fibrillation. Again, people have heart failure can develop atrial fibrillation, but atrial fibrillation, especially if it's not detected and not controlled, can cause heart failure, okay? So that's another thing that should be on the list that's not, but I didn't get around to changing the slide, so I'm just gonna say it. And that's another one, if you got pens, you can maybe write down that that's part of it too. So these are the things: hypertension, high blood pressure, coronary disease, valve abnormalities, diabetes, obesity, sleep apnea, and thyroid disease are all things that can contribute to this. Let's talk about hypertension. Yeah, I don't think I'd be very happy with that blood pressure either. All right, that's pretty high. Now, just so y'all know, the numbers have changed a lot, so you may hear different numbers or have learned different numbers in the past. What I'll tell you is, I can tell you what the current numbers. It used to be, it was 140 and 90. all right? You have to be below 140, below 90. That's what, for eons, that's what the numbers were. For a short period of time, they changed it for people over 60 and said 150 over 90. And then they scrapped all of that and they changed everything. And so now, for the most part, what we look for is less than 130 and less than 80, all right? Now, we're not just randomly pulling numbers out, okay? That's not where this comes from. This is based on medical studies where we look at things, and what we've determined is if we get you below 140 but not below 130 on the top, or below 90 but not below 80, those people that are in that higher group have more heart attacks and more strokes than the people that are below that group. So what we're doing is we're trying to prevent things from happening. That's why we changed the goal, okay? Now, some people don't feel good when their blood pressure gets lower, and so sometimes we have to back off from these numbers, but for the most part, that's the goal. And it's also, we're looking for, anybody who checks their blood pressure at home, we're looking for consistent numbers. So for example, blood pressure goes up and down during the course of a day. If you're more active out, working in your yard and you came right in and checked your blood pressure would be higher, because you're out doing things. If you check it when you're, right when you first wake up after you are asleep at night, it should generally be lower because you haven't been doing anything. If you're watching the Packers and they're losing, it may be higher, okay? So there's different things that make them go higher and lower. So what I'm looking for is kind of, and again, this analogy I use all the time with patients, the way I view blood pressure is like this. It's like a movie at the movie theater. So the movie at the movie theater's got a lot of frames, okay, that has to go through I'm not talking about DVDs and things like that, because there's no frames in those. But in the movie theater, there's those frames that go through a projector. And as it goes through all the projector, it tells the story of the movie, and then you know what the movie's about, and you tell what's going on. A single blood pressure is like one frame in the movie, all right? That's like me being able to say I can take one frame and tell you what the whole movie's about if I see one blood pressure. But I usually can't do that. You can't tell from one frame what the movie's about. The more frames you have, even if you don't have all of them, you might be able to piece together what the story's about by looking at each individual frame. So the more blood pressures we get, we can kind of piece it together, but it will go up and down. So what I'm looking at is an overall view, not just a one number view, all right? So if you're mostly below 130 and below 80, and occasionally you get a blood pressure that's above that, I don't worry about that. On the other hand, if the opposite is true and you're mostly above 130 over 80 and occasionally below, that's when I start jumping in and saying we probably should try to get that down. Coronary artery disease, okay? So this is the typical thing that's involved with heart attacks or impending heart attacks, or you could have a heart attack or whatever, because again, these coronary arteries are arteries that feed the heart muscle. So if the heart muscle is just like the liver or the muscle, the regular muscle, or the brain or anything else, if it doesn't get blood flow, it dies. That's what a heart attack is. Heart muscle dies, okay? So again, this shows a normal artery there. That's one with a cholesterol buildup and a partial blockage on it. So people that have those kind of problems can have decreased heart function. Now initially, you can see that the diastolic, usually the first step is it gets stiff as it gets starved for oxygen, and as time goes on, then it starts having the other problem where it doesn't squeeze very well. But the bottom line is both these things, both kinds of heart failure, both diastolic and systolic, this can be one of the contributors. Now you can have more than one too. You can have high blood pressure and you can have this and you can have other things, okay? Actually, let me go back to blood pressure because one thing I did want to emphasize in blood pressure. The way to think about it is the blood pressure is the pressure the heart has to push against to get blood out of the heart and into the body, okay? So the higher it is, the harder the heart has to work to get blood out. Eventually, the heart will try to keep up with that, okay? But eventually, it gets pooped out and it can fail. So that's the reason you get failure from high blood pressure. The way you get high failure from this is if you just have no good blood flow to your heart muscle doesn't work right. Valvular disease, all right? So there's 4 valves in the heart. Their job is to open to let blood out, or blood through, and then to close to keep blood from falling back where it just came from, all right? Because you want blood going one way. Remember I mentioned that whole circuit, you want it going one way through that circuit, not going backwards. One of the things that makes it go backwards is if a valve leaks, okay? If a valve leaks, then that can, and it depends on how much, And usually milder levels of valve leakage don't cause problems, but we usually follow those because they can get worse as time goes on. And so as a valve leaks more, it can develop problems where there's enough leakage going backwards that it causes a problem, because when it leaks backwards, that heart muscle has to pump that, essentially that same blood twice. The way to think about it is, if I need, let's say, 8 ounces of blood going forward with each heartbeat in order to get things going far enough so that all the tissues get enough blood flow, all right? So 8 ounces. If I have a leaky valve and I know 6 ounces is going backwards with every heartbeat, then I gotta have 14 ounces going out with each beat to get 8 going this way, because I know 6 is coming back the other way, right? So that means the heart has to work harder with each beat to try to keep that much going out. So it creates, again, more work on the heart, and the heart can eventually fail. The other thing that can happen is this kind of thing, where a valve gets scarred and tight and doesn't open very well. Well, it's the same thing. It's just like, it's kind of like blood pressure. When you're trying to push against blood pressure, that's, you're kind of working against a resistance. This is the same thing. You're working against a resistance, and eventually the heart has to push harder and harder and harder to get blood out of there, and eventually it can fail. Again, usually especially with blocked or difficult opening valves, first it's usually, again, the diastolic where it gets stiff, and then eventually it gets into the systolic where it just doesn't squeeze good. All right, diabetes. This is a big, again, I'm sure you can't even read this on there because there's all kinds of weirdness on here. I just wanted to use this to kind of get to talk a little bit about diabetes. Diabetes can affect the heart in many ways. Number one, you increase risk of having blocked arteries and heart attacks and things like that. So it can contribute in that way. But in and of itself, it can cause the heart to get stiff and have other problems. And so diabetes in and of itself is another cause or contributor, I guess, of heart failure, all right, in and of itself. And these are the reasons, I mentioned blood pressure earlier in this, these are the reasons that Jill and I all get onto controlling blood pressure, controlling your diabetes. Cholesterol is another one that has to do with heart attacks. It doesn't have directly to do with heart failure, but we get on those things, and weight and all that kind of stuff, because those are all things that contribute. And so we're trying to make it so that it's less likely you're going to have these problems. Doesn't mean you can't have them. And if you have all these problems I'm talking about, doesn't mean you're going to have heart failure. It means you're more likely to, okay? So diabetes is a problem, and we need to work on controlling it. It's basically an epidemic in our society currently, and it is associated primarily with this: weight, obesity. Okay, now this is talking about body mass index, and if anybody wants to, I can tell you later about a story about body mass index, about how it's not perfect, all right? But it's the best thing we got, and we use it to try to determine how big somebody is, okay? The bigger you are, the more risk you have of other things that can cause, in this case, we're talking about heart failure, but there's other problems as well. In this case, I mean, weight causes increased risk of high blood pressure. It causes increased risk of diabetes. It causes increased risk of cholesterol problems. And it also causes increased risk of that. Okay, sleep apnea. So again, I'm going to give you my clinic version of what is sleep apnea. Okay, because a lot of people don't kind of get a good feel for what we're talking about when we talk about sleep apnea. The simplest or the most straightforward way to say is that people stop, when you have sleep apnea, you stop breathing when you sleep. That's what sleep apnea literally means. Now obviously you start again, because if you just stopped and didn't start, then you're not around anymore, all right? But you stop for periods of time, you stop breathing. So what happens is that as we're sitting here, you know, talking and listening and whatnot, your brain is making sure that your nose and mouth is connected to your lungs through your breathing tube, okay? As we start falling asleep, there's deep sleep and there's light sleep, okay? When you start out in the light sleep, because you got to go through light sleep to get to the deep sleep, when you're in light sleep, your brain is still controlling and making sure that airway's open and air's going in and air's going out, okay? Once you fall into deep sleep, however, your brain loses control of these tissues in here. And so what can happen is that these tissues can flop back and block your airway like somebody's got their hands around your throat choking. Well, when that happens, air can't go in and air can't go out, okay? And when that happens, your oxygen level drops, and your subconscious brain, which is still kind of keeping track of everything, notices that your oxygen level drops, and so it wakes you up to make you breathe. But it usually doesn't wake you up all the way to the point where you're looking around the room saying, I'm awake. It takes you from the deep sleep into the light sleep. Because then it controls your airway and makes you breathe again, okay? Oxygen level then goes up, your brain gets happy, and then what happens next is you fall back into deep sleep again. And what happens is it starts all over again. And now you're going from deep sleep to light sleep to deep sleep to light sleep all night long. For patients, the common thing that they'll complain of is being sleepy during the day. Why? Because they're not getting the good deep sleep because they keep coming out of it all night long. They think they're asleep, because again, like I said, you don't usually wake up all the way, but they're really not getting good sleep. We care about it because you stop breathing, and that causes problems, all right? So, and most of the problems that it leads to are increased risk of rhythm problems like AFib, increased risk of heart failure, and stuff like that. Increased risk of high blood pressure or difficult to control high blood pressure. So the bottom line is that people, that's basically in a nutshell what sleep apnea is. And we have treatments for it, and so I'll just kind of go through the treatment real quick because again, I've already taken up this much time, I'm going to explain the treatment. So treatment is, there's either CPAP or BiPAP. Here's the principle. When you blow up a balloon, at least most of us that have experience blowing up balloons, we do it this way. First you make a little puff to kind of blow, pop it open before you take a deep breath and do the big breath to actually blow it up, right? That's what most people do. So that what we do with these things, you wear a mask. It can't go in just your nose, but most of the time it's on your nose and mouth, and it blows air, okay, in. And for those who have sleep apnea and have CPAP, you know what I'm talking about. So it blows this air in, and the principle is it's blowing air into your airway, and it's like that little puff. It's from the inside out, it's pushing on that airway, holding it open so it doesn't collapse, and allows air to go in and air to go out. All right, so that's what sleep apnea and CPAP and all that stuff is. And then again, this talks about the different things you can see associated with sleep apnea. I'll just move on because I'm spending too much time on that. Thyroid disease, briefly, high thyroid, low thyroid, both can cause problems. Both can cause heart failure. They also can cause other things like valve abnormalities and things like that. But the bottom line is high thyroid abnormalities can be a contributor to heart failure as well. So when we have somebody that comes with heart failure, we oftentimes, that's one of the things we look for, is somebody have a thyroid issue. All right, now some treatments for heart failure. Again, I'm going to start, I shouldn't have pushed the button yet. I'm going to start with the rhythm stuff because like I said, that's the one I didn't put on a slide for. So people that, now again, being in an abnormal rhythm doesn't always cause heart failure, but if it's going fast, which people tend to do in AFib, it can cause heart failure. So one of the big things we do is try to slow hearts down so they're not going fast, so then they might not have heart failure, because if you think about it, the faster your heart goes, it gets tired out because it's working real hard, because most of the work it does is based on how fast it goes. That's why, and so when people have AFib, their heart rates are often 140, 180, somewhere in that ballpark, when they're just sitting there. Now, if your heart rate went up to 140 and you're hiking up a steep hill, all right, that kind of makes sense. That's what the heart does. But when it happens when you're just sitting in a chair, it's not good. So again, rhythm things is one of the things we do work on trying to treat and control. And it doesn't necessarily, sometimes it's getting you out of the heart rhythm, sometimes it's just controlling the heart rhythm. And we're not necessarily getting you out of it. And sometimes either one of those can help. All right, now this is one of the things I want to really talk about. We kind of alluded to it earlier. Jill was talking about dietary stuff, and one of the things she really talked about or mentioned was salt or sodium, all right? Salt is just sodium chloride, so sodium is half of salt or part of salt. But the bottom line is that it's important when you're dealing with these kind of things, heart failure, to read labels. Well, actually two parts. First, you don't add salt. So don't get your little salt shaker out and go like this, okay? And the second thing is you gotta read the labels, because the labels, by law, have a whole list of things that are in there. Now, there's all things that people talk about with the calories and the cholesterol and the fat, and we all talk about all that stuff, but what I'm gonna be talking about specifically is the sodium, which is, where'd it go? There it is, right there, okay? Now, you have to be careful reading these, because the people that make these foods, they're tricky, all right? Because they want you to think that you're okay with eating that, and you're not eating too much salt and all that kind of stuff to get you to buy their stuff. So what's the first thing that you should look at when you look at a label? Who can tell me? How many servings per container? That is correct. Because if that's what's going to take, because whatever that number is, in this case it's 8, every number on here you have to, if you eat that entire container, let's say it's a can of soup or whatever, you have to multiply by 8. So if you ate that whole thing, you're talking 8 times, let's just use the fat, that'd be 8 times 8, 64 grams of fat. It's not 8 grams of fat. All right, so the first thing you have to learn about reading labels is how many servings is I'm talking about. Now again, you may not eat the whole container, I'm not saying you will, but however much of that container you eat, you have to account for how many servings you just ate, and then multiply it by that number. If you half the thing, then it's going to be 4 times whatever the numbers are here. All right, and again, I'm talking about sodium, so you got to really look at the sodium. We generally like to limit people to between 2,000 and 3,000 milligrams of sodium per day. And sometimes if people are having a really hard time with their heart failure, we have them down to 1,500 milligrams. And it's, again, in our modern society, that's not that easy to accomplish. Especially if you eat a lot of processed stuff. Because processed food, almost by definition, is going to have salt in it. It's the way it works. So canned stuff, sausages, lunch meat, anything processed-y type stuff is almost certainly going to have a lot of sodium in it. And that's where you have to start reading the labels and knowing how much sodium you're actually getting. And again, I don't tell people you can't eat things with high salt. I don't tell people they can't eat, when they have heart failure and things like that, you can't eat potato chips. You can eat potato chips if you want to. But you have to take into account, if 8 potato chips gives you, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, well that means you only got 1,000 more milligrams of sodium you can use the rest of the day and all the rest of the stuff you eat. So that's how you have to calculate and know what you can eat. So again, labels are important. The reason sodium or salt is so important is because when you eat salt, your body can't just have concentrated salt in there, it has to dilute it out. And so to dilute it out, it has to hold on to fluid, because it has to try to make it so it's not concentrated salt, it's more dilute salt. Well, then you hold on to more fluid, and then that's more problems. That's when you get swelling and everything kind of backs up. You got too much fluid on it. So that's why you have to stay away or try to avoid sodium. All right, so this says you need to move more. Okay, so activity is very important. Being in shape, quote unquote, is important. And even people with bad heart disease, I tell them you need to exercise. Okay. Now initially, you won't be able to do much. You'll be able to walk for 5 minutes, and then you get tuckered out. And you can't go any further. What I tell patients all the time is the key is repetition. And sometimes this has to happen because of different things. Like we recently, actually the sartans, that's a good one to talk about. There was a lot of the generic, I can't remember which one it was, I think it was Herbicide, but it was one of the sartans. A lot of it's made in China. This was before the whole coronavirus thing. But there was the factory that was mostly making it, they saw that they were making it wrong and there's some little amount of cancer-causing agent in there, and so they shut it all down. Well, then all of a sudden you couldn't get that, whatever it is, whatever sartan it was, and so a lot of people had to be switched to a different sartan. But it's still the same group because it all ends in sartan, okay? Entresto is a new one. I hesitate to talk too much about it because one of the big things, I talk to the drug reps about this stuff all the time when they try to tell me how good their drugs are, and their drugs are good. This is a good drug. We use it similar to these other two, but it's better than these other two, all right, in improving outcomes and symptoms and whatnot with heart failure. The problem is Anybody seen this advertised on TV?
All the side
Well, no, side effects, I'll talk, just give me a second, I'll tell you talk about side effects. Entresto, the problem with Entresto is if it's advertised on TV, that means they're still making a lot of money off of it, and so it ain't cheap, okay? So the bottom line is that that's the thing. Now, they try to find ways to make it not quite as expensive, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is, it's better, but not everybody can afford it. Your insurance may cover some of it, but you still may have a bill of $40, $50 a month. And for some people, that's too much, and they can't afford it. So then I have them on these other ones, because these other ones are good, they're just not as good. Okay? Now let's talk, you mentioned side effects, so we'll talk about side effects. This is one of my, how can I say it? When I'm dealing with patients, one of my pet peeves in dealing with y'all, okay? Because here's the thing. People oftentimes, when we try to prescribe some of these medicines, they look at the list that you'll get from the pharmacy when you get the prescription, and they'll say, oh wow, I'm gonna get all this stuff. That's not true. These are all the things you can get. Most people get nothing. Because if everybody got something, no one would take anything, okay? So the bottom line is you have to understand, side effects occur. Yes, do they occur? Yes, they do. Some of them are worse, some of them are not as bad. I happen to take one of the pills, okay, ACE inhibitors, for my blood pressure. I have high blood pressure. So I take lisinopril for that. One of the side effects of lisinopril is a dry cough, all right? You get a little tickle in the back of your throat. You just I was actually, today, I seen a patient, I had to cough a bunch, pull over and cough a bit because you can't stop yourself from coughing. There's a tickle in your throat. Lasted about, I don't know, actually longer than usual today, but probably about a minute and a half, then it was gone. That's a side effect. I could jettison that medicine and say, oh my gosh, it's a side effect, I can't take this. But it's a minimal, it doesn't bother me that much. It's annoying, and it happens every once in a while. So that's one of the things I talk to patients about. You have to decide, and some side effects are big deals, like your liver could fail and this and that, but some of them are just annoyances, all right? So I tell patients, if you have a good medicine, you have to decide, how annoying is this? You're getting benefit out of the medicine, is it annoying enough that you want to lose that benefit, all right? And so you have to think of it that way. Sometimes there's a little bit of a nuisance with taking medicines. It would be perfect. It'd be nice if everything was perfect and we could do things and there was never any bad parts to it, but that's not the way the world works. And then there's diuretics. So basically when you start accumulating that fluid, diuretics have to get rid of that fluid. Now I'll talk about that for a second. What's one of the main side effects of diuretics that patients complain to me all the time about is what? You gotta pee all the time. That's the point. Okay? If you've got too much fluid on board, you gotta get rid of it. A quick story. Before I was here, I was in New Mexico for a couple of years. Wide open spaces, people come from long distances. I had a guy that lived on a ranch, came in to see me in clinic, and was telling me he was having all this swelling in his legs, and he couldn't get rid of it. I had to do something about it. So I gave him a diuretic. Comes back a month or two later, says that didn't work. It didn't help me. So I increased the dose of the diuretic. So then he comes back a couple months later and says it's still not working. So I increased it some more, okay? Thinking that my diuretic's not working. So and then the next time he comes, and I can't remember how we got on the topic, but he somehow mentioned to me that he doesn't take his diuretic when he comes into town because he's long distance driving, he can't stop and pee all the time, okay? All right, so I say, okay, so how often do you come into town? He says every day. Well, then you're not taking your medicine, is what you're telling me. So I can't help your swelling if you're not taking your medicine to get rid of the fluid, but yeah, it's gonna make you pee. That's what it does. So I wish, again, it's the same thing. I wish there was solutions to these problems, but there's not. You either and again, it's right to tell you have to decide how annoying things are. Is peeing a lot more annoying, or is having a big swelling and not being able to breathe more annoying? Which one's more annoying? And that's what you have to decide. All right. Treatment for heart failure, this is sleep apnea. This is, again, kind of that machine I was talking about. You have to wear it at your bedside when you sleep, blows that air in there. treatment for blocked arteries. Okay, if you have blocked arteries, you need to get more blood flow to your heart muscle. So how do you do that? Well, stents is one, and I didn't put a picture of that on there, but stents are like a little piece of metal like the inside of a spring of a pen. If you want, you pull these pens open, there's probably a little spring in there. And it looks kind of like that. That's crunched down on a balloon, and then they go across the narrowing of one of these arteries that I showed earlier, and then they blow up that balloon and it kind of pops it open, and it acts as scaffolding, kind of holds that artery open, all right? So sometimes stents work to get more blood flow. This is talking about bypass surgery, because what they do is they try to make connections where the good red blood is going around the blockages, and they tie one end up to where the good red blood source is, and they tie the other end to where it needs to get to, and it's going past blockages. So one bypass, 2, 3, 4. I've seen people, I think the most I can remember seeing is 7. 7's kind of overkill. You know, as a matter of fact, probably with 7, you don't get any more benefit out of 7 than you probably do out of 3 or 4. But I have seen that many at one time, and I kind of thought that maybe it was a little overkill. So bypass surgery, why? Because again, it gets more blood flow to the heart muscle if doesn't have enough blood flow. You gotta get that blood flow. Valve replacement, if your valve leaks, if your valve's tight, you gotta fix it somehow, all right? Now, the old-fashioned way, I should say old-fashioned because we've only been able to do heart surgery since like the 1950s, so it's not that old. But the old-fashioned way is you crack the chest, you cut the breastbone, open up the chest, they go into the heart, cut the heart open, cut out a valve, get another valve. It's either mechanical, which is plastic and metal, or it's a tissue valve, and it's often either pig or cow. It's not, they don't just like go to a cow and pull out his valve and slap it in you. They process it, it's clean. And then they sew it in, okay? So then they give you a new valve to allow things to kind of work better again. So there's mechanical, like I said, this is a mechanical valve. This is a tissue valve. And also obviously it has some metal parts to it, but it's the actual working part is the middle here, which is all tissue. This one you see is on a balloon. And somebody was asking me earlier about this, is something called a TAVR, all right? So again, I said it used to be everything was open heart surgery. Now there's other ways to do some of this stuff. I'm not gonna say all of this stuff. And who knows, 10 years from now, maybe we'll have even more different valve things we can work on without doing open heart surgery. But right now, this is kind of the one, which is the TAVR. There's actually a second one, which you also have, which is the mitral clip. And so we can do clips a little bit too, but this is the main one. So this one is what you do is you have a valve that's, again, crunched down on a balloon. And in this one, you don't cut out the old valve. You just put this inside the old valve and you just blow it up and pop it open and you get a new valve out of it. Now, originally it was designed for folks who were too sick and wouldn't survive open heart surgery, so they had to come up with something else for them. So that's what this started out as. Now they've shown, so that high risk people, now they've shown that it actually seems to work pretty well in moderate risk people too. There's a debate about whether it's gonna ever replace open heart surgery altogether. I wouldn't count on it, all right? Because people are low risk, that have low risk for surgery are low risk for a reason. And I don't know that this is going to gain that much over that, but at least it looks like maybe moderate to severe or moderate to high risk, this might become something we do more of. The thing we don't know about it, because this is relatively new, probably 10 years, between 7 and 10 years this has been going on. With the open heart surgery, we know how long the valves last, because we got a long time we've been using them, and so you can tell how long they're going to last. These ones we don't have enough time to know. So maybe these only last 10 years. They've only been around for 10 years, maybe that's all they last. Whereas the other ones, maybe they last, well, we know some of them last up to 20, 25, 30 years, and some of the mechanical ones, as far as we can tell, they kind of last forever. I mean, that's probably an overstatement, but that's what we think. So, and again, there's reasons we recommend people getting this kind of valve versus that kind of valve. I won't go into it unless somebody wants to specifically ask about it, but the bottom line is, otherwise everybody would say, well, why don't I ever get a mechanical valve? Well, there's downsides to it, okay? But anyway, so for this is now a thing that we think that it's gonna turn out to be something that's pretty good and that's gonna be very helpful. But it only helps one kind of valve problem currently that we know of. And that's called aortic stenosis, which is where one valve, the aortic valve, is tight, doesn't open well. That's what this is for. If you have any other kind of valve problem, that's not for it, okay? Now, like I said, as time goes on, maybe we find other things that we can do similarly, but right now, that's the one, okay? Technology changes things, so eventually maybe things will be different. All right, so summary. Heart failure is a syndrome where the heart can't provide blood and oxygen to tissues, and the blood and fluid back up. There are two main kinds that I talked about: systolic, which is again the squeeze problem; diastolic, which is the heart is stiff. Primary symptoms of heart failure include shortness of breath, swelling, edema or swelling in the legs, and low energy. Main contributors cause of heart failure include high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, diabetes, obesity, sleep apnea, and there are medication and non-medication treatments that we use to try to treat heart failure. All right, now I'm done.